Welcome back, everybody, to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jameson Cable, and I'm here with Daniel Hopkins, and we're going to get back into the Ashland tragedy. We've had a lot of people comment, tell us that they enjoyed the story, and we're not too happy with the cliffhanger, but not too many people are happy with cliffhangers. But they always get you wanting more, right?
So we're hoping for wanting more. I mean, it's still kind of an odd story to have, somebody wanting more, but we get it. I understand. So yeah. It is an interesting tale. I'm kind of anxious to see where it goes in part 2 today.
Yes, and that's one thing to point out that Daniel doesn't necessarily know the entirety of the story, so he's kind of riding along with everybody in suspense of what happens next. And I'm just going to forewarn everybody. It gets even crazier as we go. But again, this is from Joe Castle's book, The Ashland Tragedy. A very good book. I highly recommend it. If you want to purchase the book, you can find those links in the description. Also, he has a Facebook page. You can purchase the book through that as well. I will start by saying that I was wrong. It is Catlettsburg.
I told you.
I don't know where I heard Catlettsburg from, but it's Catlettsburg. Multiple people informed me that I was wrong. That's okay. Sometimes we're wrong. But a quick recap. We had this story takes place in Ashland, of course, and 3 kids were died in a house fire. And it came to light that it was not an accident, that they were actually murdered. Detectives were brought in and searched for the 2 of the kids. Because, well, let me rehash the kid's name. You had Robbie and Fanny Gibbons, brother and sister combo there. And then you had, I forgot her name. Emma. Then you had Emma, who was the neighbor who came over to spend the night, and they were the 3 that died that night on Christmas Eve morning. So not a good time of year. And but anyway, so they brought in a detective to find out what had happened. The detective kind of pointed the finger at John Gibbons, the father of Fanny and Robbie, and that's where we kind of left off. That that was going on, and then but there was one other, and this kind of is more relevant to the then and now. That a deputy U.S. Marshal came in named James Heflin, and he came in to kind of also investigate the crime, but he kind of thought that or he thought he could find John Gibbons. So that is where we left off. That does that sound about right, Daniel?
Yeah. I think you summed her up pretty well.
All right. Well, again, wild story. Definitely pretty interesting. And also, if you have any questions, if you get any questions that pop in your mind, let us know, because Joe is going to be on the show probably about the middle of August. We'll bring him on and talk to him as well. So without further ado, we'll keep on rolling. So as I said, Deputy Heflin came to Ashland, and again, we talk about these deputies, and you think about, oh, there's a crime, I'm telling the police are going to handle it. That's not exactly the case in 1880. Excuse me. Excuse me again. The police force that we think of now is not like it was then. Hiring somebody, an outside person to come, was very typical, especially if it was a unique case like this was. You don't have the, what is it, CIS or no, what's NCIS or what's that crime show that has all the CSI? That's it. That's not that's not available. That technology is not available. And, I don't know how accurate that show is either. So those things, not as
Yeah,
easy to determine.
it's one of the things too to keep in mind. Like you mentioned that about how it's the policing is different. So much science and technology is different. I mean, and we might have talked about this in the previous episode, but we kind of look back on things like that and wonder why they did it this way or that way. But like you said, the stuff that's lacking, that you're almost having to find an eyewitness.
Mm-hmm.
You're having to find a smoking gun, as it were. I mean, today we can rely on a lot of other things. I mean, just think about how many homes have security cameras.
Yeah.
And maybe how many people's neighbors' home have a security camera that might catch a person coming in or whatever. You don't have to have a physical person sitting there staring to see that happen. Think about fingerprints and about blood, DNA, and those kinds of things that can be found on the scene. None of that, I mean, I guess it existed in the sense that blood existed, but none of that technology to solve a crime existed. Now, mix that in with smaller, many times private police forces. You didn't have a sizable local sheriff's department or city police department. And so you've got these sort of hired folks that come in from other places. It's almost amazing that any crime was solved at the time.
Yeah, everything you would think would be based on hearsay and very little evidence, those sorts of things. But anyway, so Deputy Heflin did not agree with Norris's theory, which Norris was the original detective hired from the committee there in Ashland, the local community committee that they formed to investigate. So Norris's theory was that John Gibbons had came in and he was kind of older and burnt the house, killing the kids, and probably even killed himself possibly. But Deputy Heflin came in and said, I don't agree with this. This does not sound accurate at all. Why did Norris, completely go against what the doctors had said? And he basically put down Norris's theories in any way. And again, Norris's theory or the doctors had said that the two girls had been raped. Norris said that didn't happen. Anyway, his goal was to find Gibbons, which led him to West Virginia. And that's where John Gibbons was. He'd been in West Virginia for quite a while, working on a farm with a guy that his name was Hager. And to think about this, oftentimes, even nowadays, you will have people who will go work on a farm for a while, especially in a rural area. And that's kind of how they'll make their money. John Gibbons was a person who seemed to do this a lot. He was not home much at all with his wife and kids. But he was doing this at the time. And Heflin arrived in a place called Hamlin, West Virginia, which was in Lincoln County, West Virginia. And that's where he found the man named Hager, who told him about Gibbons and said that he had been with him the entire time. And he said Gibbons had become distraught upon hearing the news and wanted to leave immediately. But Hager actually advised him, no, let him go first before Gibbons, so that he could gather some information and it wouldn't be, such a mess, I guess. But Hager took Heflin to get Gibbons at his farm, and the three of them then returned to Ashland. Ashland, of course, was just up in a huge frenzy once they found out that Gibbons was coming back. And think about this too. Gibbons, his name had been completely tarnished, ran through the mud. He was probably very much painted like a monster. A man comes and burns his family's house and his kids, and you can only imagine. Not to say Gibbons was a good guy. I don't believe what's the saying? I don't know if there is a saying. Of a saying about no, that doesn't work. I was gonna say no good deed goes unpunished, but he wasn't doing a good deed, I don't think.
No, but he has, whatever the cause, he has lost his family here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are, um, there are deaths, and it feels like knocking him is in a way kind of, I don't know, mocking is not the right word, but kind
Mm-hmm.
of, you're in all I can think of is like dancing on the grave of the people that are dead. And that's not really the right term, but it feels like, they're still his children and wife that are
Yeah.
deceased here,
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It always feels, even people today, when people are accused or, and even in some cases found guilty of heinous crimes of maybe murdering someone, I always feel like there's still part of that person, even if they did it, that has to have this thought of, my close relatives, my loved ones per se, are dead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think about thinking about the O.J. Simpson trial.
Yeah.
Like he went to trial and sat in that courtroom every day,
Yeah.
accused of this. But at some point, you wonder, he's like, did it ever set with him like, my wife is dead, and I don't think to compare that to this, but you do wonder if Gibbons is kind of, as he's being brought back into Ashland, is kind of thinking this, like, I have dead family members.
Yeah. 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 Well, so he goes to, I don't know the technical law terms or court terms, but he has a quick trial, and he's pretty much proven though innocent based on Hager's testimony, because Hager's like, he was with me the whole time. He's been with me for days, or during all this stuff. He was at my house. He's been working for me for months, this and that, and basically he is freed of the charges. He's proven innocent. The case is then opened back up. So the first hill of the roller coaster is done with. The second thing, though, when someone is guilty or has a guilty conscience, what tends to happen to that person?
Well, sometimes you see people who are involved in crimes that go back to the scene of crime.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes you see people that start talking a little bit, or maybe you see somebody who's trying to find some kind of forgiveness, to overcome this, whatever it is that they may be. So, is it any of those?
Well, yes, it is actually. And you have a guilty conscience, and it kind of eats away at you, and that's what happens. It kind of leads right into this. Like, Gibbons is proven innocent, and then a man comes forward, and this man's name is George Ellis. All right, and he comes forward, and he has some information and wants to talk to the Citizens Committee. Now, again, the Citizens Committee is like the group of people that have been formed to kind of lead this investigation. Hire the deputies, hire those kind of people. It's very odd to think, if my house was to burn down, or if somebody was to get hurt, or a crime was to be committed, that I would go, oh, yeah, I would go and report it, and then we would form a committee to take it on. But that's just the way it was during those times. They didn't have that, I guess, stable police force, if you want to say it in that way. But you can read his whole statement in George Castle's book. I'm not going to go into many details because it's it's a bit rough, and there's a lot of violent things mentioned. But William Neal had said multiple times that he had wanted to have intercourse with Emma Thompson, and Ellis Craft had said the same thing about Fanny Gibbons. Now, those two people both worked with George Ellis. All right, and then Christmas Eve, they both came to George Ellis's house. They told him to come with them because they were going to have some fun. At first, George said no, he was not going, and he resisted. But then Ellis Craft pulled a gun on him, and reluctantly, George Ellis went with him. And I know that can be a little bit confusing. We got Ellis Craft and then George Ellis. two different people. But I'll try to say both names when I mention one of them so nobody gets confused. So they go to the Gibbons house, and Ellis Craft gets an old axe and opens the window. Neil and Craft both go in, but George Ellis stayed on the porch. He didn't want to go in. But Ellis Craft came back out, pointed the gun at him, and told him, "You're coming in or I'm going to shoot you." So they all three go into the house. And of course, when they go into the house, they wake up Robbie. And Ellis tells him to lay back down, and Robbie does. But then he goes into the girls' room, and of course this startles up Robbie, and he comes in to stop him. However, when he comes in, Ellis Craft hits him with an axe, and he falls over dead. I think it's a straight shot to axe to the head. So the three men then go into the girls' room, where Ellis Craft rapes Fanny Gibbons, and then William Neal rapes Emma Thomas. George Ellis, the only thing he did was he held the girls down, which is quite frightening. The whole scene seems just incomprehensible. Ellis Craft said that they had burned the house because they may be suspected, and he told George Ellis to get some coal oil, and George found some, and they poured it over the girls, and then the three of them left. About to be. Or what? Oh. Real quickly. This was Cambry's pick. It was $10. Or $20. She was the wisest of the three.
She spent the full allotment.
Yeah. Where was that?
Well, let's see.
Ellis Craft had burnt the house.
Yeah, you had not said their names, or their ages and that kind of thing. I'm just following along here. So.
Okay. Well, I'll start where Ellis burnt the house. Okay.
Yeah, they have not. It's where it says Ellis said they left and split up. You haven't said that. So.
Okay. Excuse me. So Ellis Craft said that they needed to burn the house because they might be suspected. So he told George Ellis to get some coal oil, and George found some, and they poured it all over the girls, and then the three of them left. Ellis Craft then struck a match to light the fire. George Ellis said that they left and split up afterwards, but the other two must have gone back and set a fire to the house afterwards. Which kind of, anyway, I think it doesn't really make a lot of sense what I wrote there, but anyway, George Ellis said that he felt he had to tell what happened because he couldn't keep it any longer. He said he told it because he feared Ellis Craft and William Neal would tell it. He said he wanted to die and would have killed himself, but was afraid. After his confession, George asked to be protected from any mob. Ellis Craft and William Neal were both sought and brought into the committee, where George Ellis told the story in front of them, and both of them denied the accusations. So that's where we get to now. We got this confession. It then becomes, do you believe George or not? He says the same confession pretty much on cue with when Ellis is in the room and when William Neal is in the room. Obviously, they both are going to probably deny it. I don't see any situation where somebody's going to be like, oh, yeah, I did that, because it's quite heinous, and it's, pretty straightforward. If you admit to doing that, you're probably going to get hung. But one thing I want to point out, that George Ellis said he wanted to be protected from any mob. During that time, what was one thing that happened a lot?
Well, at the time, you see a lot of lynching, more in particular probably for Black Americans than white Americans, but I think this goes back to our sort of limited police and this notion of sort of taking justice into your own hands. I mean, he asked for protection from the mob, and that's legit. Like, I mean, and especially in a case like this where it already caused an uproar, and then they were out, then they were in West Virginia, and then they're coming back. You know, it's like if they had never come back, the people don't have a chance to get so stirred up. I think this is legit. Like, there's a very good chance that somebody that people would have went and got him and either hung him or shot him or chopped him up with an axe or whatever whatever would have happened.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he's afraid of, and it happens. Vigilante justice, like the police force wasn't as strong, and you have them, in a sense, you have the city or the town who's like, okay, it's John Gibbons. We've settled this. We're moving on. We're ready to bring justice, and then he's proven innocent. And it's like, oh, now we got to find somebody. Who's it going to be, or who is it? And then George Ellis comes up, and of course he's fearful that he could be taken by the mob, and maybe he's worried about a fair trial. Maybe it's just he doesn't want to have to endure that. I'm not sure. But real quickly, so George Ellis was 27. He was married, and he didn't have any kids. William Neal was 25 and was married to a lady named Sarah Rice, and they had 3 kids. Now, Ellis Craft, he was 27 as well, but he was never married. So that's kind of the ages that, just a little bit of their connection. Back then you kind of got married pretty early in most cases, not every case, but most of the time, when I first see that William Neal was 25, had 3 kids, I'm thinking, man, that's a lot when you're 25. I think I had 1 kid. No, I didn't have any kids at 25. So, seems like a lot, but yet, and back then, not so unusual, not so out of the norm. Anyway, so George Ellis and Ellis Craft were taken to Catlettsburg jail, and then Neal was snuck out later that night, and all in fear of the mob. Everybody was kind of worried, so they snuck him out, took him to the jail. And funny enough, they put all 3 of the men in the same jail cell.
Well, at this time, your jails are not what we think of today. I mean, I don't know that they're exactly Andy Griffith, where Otis put himself in and out.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's necessarily that, but your jails were at this time, they're going to be located right in town in a lot of communities. They're just small buildings. The jail and prison, of course, are 2 different terms. Jail was a short stay for a lot of folks. Prison was longer. There weren't near as many prisons at the time. There was not near as much time there was not near as much time between the accusation and the trial. Keeping this closer to home, I might have told this story before, but my grandfather told stories about the jail in downtown Crab Orchard. How he, as well as others, would drive by down the alley to the side of it, and they would drop cigarettes and things like that into them. I mean, it was a barred window. There was no glass. Barred window. You couldn't sneak out, but you could drop stuff in as you went by. And so putting them in it's quite possible that there may have even been more people than those 3 people in that same cell. I mean, it was a holding cell in the way that we would probably think of it. So.
Yeah. Which of course the town was a buzz that they had captured 3 men. The mob rule or the mob thoughts began to circulate. The local authority, of course, trying to put that to an end, and didn't want anything like that to take place. But the people of Ashland loaded the train, and they actually head to Catlettsburg to hear the evidence presented and see the prisoners. The shops in Ashland were all closed. They shut down early, and the same ended up happening in Catlettsburg as well. This was a big moment, um, I guess, of this event, of this tragedy. Everybody wanted to see um, how things would make out. This was the, we talk about entertainment, and not to say this was entertainment, but this was the uh, event that people were looking at, that people were talking about. And you take 100 years so, or 100 plus years ago, no TV, um, radio. Yeah, when was the radio invented? Right off.
Well, at this time, I think it was invented in like the late 1800s, but it was not a
Staple.
you're not really about this time is when people are starting to get radios in their homes. But
Yeah.
you're right. The word event is accurate. Like that's what this is. I mean, this is a form of entertainment. And those people, it's excuse me, it's 11 miles, or excuse me, it's 6 miles from Ashland to Catlettsburg. We don't, 6 miles is maybe from our house to the end of the road for
Yeah.
a day. I mean, we may drive 4 times that to go to work, but to load up and to go to that area, it was just close enough that people could actually do that. But there's a natural curiosity that exists in people, and what's going to happen, and I want to be there when whatever happens. And if it's bad, I kind of want to be there when something bad happens.
Yeah.
There's this thing that sort of prevails. Think about a car crash or something like that. Even today, it can be off the road and the road is not even closed, but when people drive by it, they slow way down and their head is turned straight sideways. There's this sense of, I want to see whatever I can see happen. And if it means get on a train and go 6 miles down the road, then
That's
I want to do it.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the thought, at this time. A lot of the information you're giving is either hearsay or from somebody else. So if you're there though, and you see it, you have the information, you can't watch a video or hear a radio broadcast. If you want the 100% truth, you have to be there to see it. Because if not, it could very well become muddled down with not accurate information. So anyway, rumors are spreading that a mob was building up and would be at Catlettsburg at 1 p.m. to hang the prisoners. And this, to get the dates, you probably need to read the book of Joe Castle's book, because I didn't put all the dates down in my notes and stuff, because I didn't want to sit there and, August 5th, December 25th, I didn't want to, have to go back and forth between all that. But this is very soon afterwards. This is not, this might actually have been the next day that they were already ready. Let's go hang these people who did this terrible crime. Judge Brown and other officials heard of the coming mob, and they arranged for the prisoners to be transported again to Maysville. And if you're going down, we're kind of going down the river here on the city towns or not city towns. That doesn't make any sense.
River towns.
River towns, yeah. But anyway, so as the prisoners though are being loaded onto the Mountain Girl to be transported, the mob arrives at Catlettsburg. And to get you a little bit of information, these are steamboats, and steamboats, they do not have the ignition that a car does. You turn the key, it fires up, and you go. They have to gain steam, and I don't really know what all that entails, but they have to gain steam to get to moving. The Mountain Girl, was a steamboat, and the mob was coming quite fast. So instead, a ferry boat was nearby. Seeing that the Mountain Girl was still building up steam and the mob was coming, they decided to go to a ferry boat that is also nearby, but already has enough steam built up. So they began to go to the ferry boat. The mob gets there though, and they end up getting up getting on the Mountain Girl, which is now gaining speed. So you got these two things happening. The Mountain Girl is picking up speed, or gaining steam, I should say. The ferry boat already had enough steam gained up or built up, so the prisoners get on the ferry boat, and then the mob arrives and they get on the Mountain Girl, which is also a steamboat. So we have a chase down the river. I don't know how fast a steamboat goes, but I don't think this is going to be that fast of a chase. But people,
I'm not really sure I'm not sure about a mountain or about mountain boat, a steamboat. I can't imagine it would go too fast.
Yeah, I don't either. But anyway, so the people got back. Some of the people got back onto the train, and they head back to Ashland because they know that the Mountain Girl is gonna catch up to the ferry boat by the time they get to Ashland. The mob wants them to stay in Boyd County. They think it happened in Boyd County. This needs to be tried in Boyd County, and so forth. But if you can imagine this, people are running back and forth to get on trains, boats, trying to just see what happens in this event. And now, if you're going down, if you're at Catlettsburg and you're on the river, you're going to pass Ashland in order to get to Maysville. And that's kind of the way people are seeing this. If we get to Ashland, we'll be able to see the ferry boat get caught, and because the ferry boat's just not fast enough to outrun the steamboat. So everybody rushes to get into place to see. People are like on the banks of the river, just to get a glimpse and see this happening. However, there was a bit of a ruse in play. People were very disappointed to find out that there was no prisoners on the ferry boat whenever they got to Ashland. The prisoners had actually been transferred to another steamboat, not to confuse anybody, but the Mountain Boy. And as people realized that the switch had happened, that the Mountain Boy was already out of reach. So somewhere along the river, the Mountain Boy came from Ashland, met the ferry boat, exchanged prisoners, turned around and left. And by the time the Mountain Girl caught up to the ferry boat, the prisoners were gone. So a disappointed mob, and in a way, I would assume some grateful prisoners. The Mountain Boy had 25 Maysville guards ordered to protect the prisoners, and this was from Governor Luke Blackburn, which we'll get into him a little bit more later. But anyway, these guards were ordered. 25 guards were ordered to protect these three prisoners, who I would say everybody was in pretty good agreement on. Killed and raped these girls and burnt down this house, killed these kids. While in Maysville, the prisoners were in an old prison where people were able to visit and see the prisoners. And it was said here that George Ellis, tried to form a case of being insane. But he did keep to his original of confession that the other two were guilty, along with himself, I guess. He never said that he was innocent of not doing what he claimed he had done. So yeah, which is, I take it as George Ellis is guilty as well. Even though he may not have committed the crimes, I still see him as a guilty accomplice. Is it accomplice?
Accomplice, yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. We're gonna stop right there on another cliffhanger. Well, not as much of a cliffhanger, but just a point that this a break in the story, I guess. The prisoners are now in prison. Go ahead.
I think it shows the mentality of mob and the way that people acted or reacted, whatever word you want to use, for the time period, in the way that they realized that they had to almost trick the people in how they were transporting. Today, maybe a prisoner goes from, the courtroom out the back door, and then they send somebody out the front door so that that kind of thing. And there's not really a concern of mobs and that kind of thing today, but I think the whole mountain boy, mountain girl story realizes that there's a really good chance that people are going to try and overtake, whoever's on this boat and kill these people, and we have to figure out a way, to get them to where we're trying to take them, for them to have their fair trial, or to avoid lynching or something like that. So a situation here where the authorities, the people in charge, they really didn't know. They knew what possibly could happen.
And that's the thing too. Like the authorities are kind of trying to keep it to a fair trial and go through the procedures, but the mob is like, let's just get this over with. We know what happened. And to an extent that might not be true. There might be some other evidence they need to find, or this and that. And we'll get into that, the trials, in the next episode. We'll talk about some of the trials and so forth. And then the story takes another turn that I was definitely shocked by as I read the book. But we'll wrap it up for now. Again, if you want to get the book, you can get the book now and start reading it. The Ashland Tragedy: Murder, a Mob, and a Militia in Kentucky. It's a really good book to read. Again, thank Joe Castle for sending it, and we'll get into more later. Now, the next episode we have out, I actually might be with another author, putting out another author is going to come on the show and talk with him. So it might be 2 weeks before the next episode about the Ashland Tragedy comes out. So hold tight. We're going to get it done eventually, and have Joe Castle on as well. So anything else, Mr. Hopkins?
I'm good. I'm even more intrigued than when we left the last one.
Good. Then it's working. The story is getting more and more intense, which it will. I tell you, there's another turn that people's jaws will drop. But anyway, with nothing else, I guess that'll be it. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.